Hello chess friends and welcome to the Art of Chess channel and welcome back to the FIDE Candidates in 2022. So we're now already in the round 10 and before this round Nepo had I think a beautiful and comfortable situation where he was 1 point better than Fabiano Caruana and 2 points better than Hikaru Nakamura. We have to say Fabi messed up his opportunities in the tournament in the last round where he played only a draw against Jan Nepomniachtchi. He had to really win the game in order to catch up with him. Now he's basically relying on some other results, so he has to wait. He has to rely really on some other players playing good games against Jan Nepomniachtchi because he doesn't have anymore the opportunity to take away some points in a direct game anymore against Jan Nepomniachtchi. Hikaru has of course the opportunity still to maybe catch up with Jan Nepomniachtchi. At least he can maybe mess up his results by winning a game against Nepo in a direct game, but we have said that Nakamura is 2 points behind Nepo, so even if he wins this game against Nepo, then still he is 1 point behind. So as I said, it's really wild. Nepo played really the best chess so far. He didn't lose any games and is now really the top favorite to win the whole thing. So okay, we're starting now the round 10 with a beautiful game played by young Krzysztof Duda against Fabiano Caruana, and it was again a little bit big opportunity here by Fabiano Caruana to catch up with Nepo because Nepo played only a draw against Teimour Radjabov. We have to say it only, not that it's a huge problem that you play the draw against Teimour Radjabov, but I think when we watched the tournament so far, really Nepo was the big favorite against Radjabov, but only played a draw, which gave now really Fabiano Caruana again the opportunity to catch up, maybe with a win against young Krzysztof Duda in this round, to catch up and at least have half of the point less than Jan Nepomniachtchi, which would still be of course the leader of this event. So let's see now what happens. So young Krzysztof Duda here with the white pieces against Fabiano Caruana with the black pieces. So e4 played by Duda, we have e5 by Fabi, we have knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4 and bishop to c5. We have the Italian game, the gioco piano. The symmetrical variation here is on the board. So we have c3 with ideas of course to break through with the move d4, so that's why knight to f6, at least attacking immediately the pawn on e4. So we have now d3, the classical system, solid system, fixing the pawn structure in the center, developing of course the dark bishop and also including the knight into the game. So we have d6, the king side castling, we have a6 here by Fabiano Caruana, because in the near future also b4 b5 could happen, so that's why we have a6, and now if b4 happens, still you have a good square for the bishop. The bishop is staying on this very active diagonal. So we have a4, we have bishop to a7, we have rook to e1, protecting now the pawn on e4 and preparing now finally the breakthrough with the move d4. So we have kingside castling by Fabi, h3, prophylactic idea of course. Many times this is a beautiful move. This move is also popular in the Spanish game, where not allowing some bishop to g4 idea, spinning the knight, because as we said now, our main goal is to play the move d4, breaking in the center. So that's why if you get pinned, then it's an unpleasant game if you push d4 too early. So that's why here bishop to e6 was played by Fabiano Caruana, and probably this line he has prepared somewhere at home. There are many lines and the position is pretty much equal, so nothing special, but I really never liked the Italian because I try to avoid it, because I don't want to play this kind of lines. I really don't like it, because look at this, after bishop to e6, f takes e6, okay, you have some ideas, but the e6 pawn is always a long-term problem, and in this game it will become also a long-term problem. Not that you lose the game immediately because you have a structural weakness on e6, but I never loved this. I really lost many games when I played the Italian in this types of structure, in this types of positions, so that's why I try to avoid. Of course, these are much stronger players, they know wilder ideas, but you see that, as I said, even in this game, this pawn on e6 will be a huge strategic and tactical problem. So in the continuation, we have b4, we have knight to h5, so Fabi continues now the pressure because the f file is open. That's of course the good side of this move, f takes e6, that you have now the opportunity to occupy a very important square f4, but still this square can many times be protected in the later stage and not immediately with the move g3. G3 is not working immediately because knight takes g3 is working. F takes g3 is not a possibility because of the powerful bishop's activity on this long diagonal. So g3 you cannot play immediately, but first you can maybe get out of the range with the king and then prepare this defensive idea g3, and when that happens, the knight has to step back and then maybe have then other opportunities to continue in the game. So here in the continuation, after knight to h5, we have knight to d2, preparing knight to c4 maybe, then also maybe knight to e3 is a solid idea. Many times white is playing even knight to c4 and then follows with bishop to e3, where basically we don't like this dash for bishop here on this diagonal, so we're trying to compete in this kind of an idea with this kind of maneuver. Simply we want to trade off the bishops off the board. So but okay, here knight to f4 was played by Fabiano Caruana, knight to f1, again with the idea maybe to play afterwards to move bishop to e3. Now queen to f6 by Fabi, so he's including now all of the pieces into the attack. And now here young Krzysztof Duda played bishop to f4, undermines really the pressure by this knight. He really didn't want to tolerate this powerful piece dancing in front of his king so much, so that's why bishop to f4 really makes sense. So e takes f4 is playable, but then d4 is going to happen, and now white has a powerful center. Whatever black does here in the center, if you play e5, white will pass through with the move d5 and will have then some spaces. Even if you play, I don't know, d5, then still white is going to play e5 and still will have, of course, a space advantage again on this side of the board. Then we'll probably proceed with c4 b5 and we'll have fun for sure on the queen side. So the problem is also by black here, and I think in this position, that white has still good defenders in front of the king. So both of these knights are playing very important defensive roles in front of the king. So black is lacking in attackers in this attack, so white can defend this position very easily. So as we said, after bishop to f4, Fabi spiced up the game with the move queen takes f4, stayed a little bit active with his pieces, and what he's trying now to do is to include both of these rooks into the game. So he's trying rook to f6, maybe rook to g6, and then follows with rook to f8, so he would then have really a beautiful attacking formation. Still, the engine likes here white's position better, because especially because of the healthier pawn structure, but you have to be careful here in the position, because if you make maybe a slight inaccuracy, then black's attack could be really devastating. So really so far a good attacking formation by Fabi. So queen to b3, and now comes the downside about this move e6. So already it's a structural weakness. As we said, you will not lose the game immediately, but it becomes really a tactical problem now for Fabiano Caruana in the game. So here rook to f6, this is a playable move where you're protecting your pawn on e6, but you're staying also very active on the 6th rank. Now you can also attack the g file. You could also try some ideas of rook to e8, but then it's very hard to include the rook into the game, of course, through the 6th rank. So that's why here Fabi's choice was brilliant, rook to f6 now with ideas to play rook to g6. So b5, here Jan Krzysztof Duda is sensing that he is getting attacked on the king side, so he's counter playing on this other side. He's counter attacking on the queen side. We have knight to a5, although maybe slightly better is to play rook to g6 immediately, because if you take, of course, then queen takes f3 is really destroying white's position. Of course, white doesn't have to play this position like this, has to play first king to h1, but now after knight to a5, at least the knight is again creating a tempo, and now this rook maybe can come into the game. So I really love now this continuation here for black. The rook is already there, so maybe it was a slightly better idea here for Fabiano Caruana. But okay, after b5 we have knight to a5 immediately by Fabi without playing the move rook to g6. We have queen to a2. You see how young Krzysztof Duda is staying on this long diagonal. Although this is not an optimal square for the queen, we have to say, to be with your queen in the corner of the board. There are many better squares for the queen, but Fabi gets challenged more and more about this main weakness in the position, which is of course the e6 pawn. So g5, and this move is really wild already, and here I think Fabi plays some moves because he has to catch up with Jan Nepomniachtchi. I'm not sure if Fabi would ever play this line. If he maybe would be the leader of this tournament, he would play, I think, more solid line. Maybe he would play something like rook to f8. In my opinion, rook to f8 is slightly better. Still, you can always play g5 whenever you want, but I like the fact that you're including more pieces into the game. You see, when you start an attack, you want to have all of your pieces in the attack, and I think rook to f8 is slightly better. In my opinion, this was the careless move by Fabiano Caruana, exposing yourself so much. Now look at this, e6 is weakened. Now with move g5 h5 you have exposed also your own king here, so that's why it was a risky choice. It was a brave and brilliant choice when it comes to the beauty of chess, but as I said, I'm not sure if Fabi would have to play this move if he wouldn't be maybe the second place here in the tournament. If he maybe would be the leader, I'm sure that he would play a more solid move, rook to f8. So he started the attack immediately, g5. So we have now knight to h2 here by young Krzysztof Duda, so he's preventing now the g4 pawn immediately. Here we have rook to g6. Fabi is continuing the pressure, and now after move d4 we have now h5, and this move is again really wild because again you're exposing your own king. Notice that now only the rook is holding the pawn on e6. There is now maybe again slightly improvement. Again, maybe you can play rook to f8, or maybe after rook to e3 you can still maybe pull off this move h5, but I really like more when you include this rook into the game, because then you have more threats, more ideas in the game. So maybe again a slightly better continuation here from Fabi, but he rushed and he played h5 immediately, and Duda plays now a beautiful move g3. We have set it. Now this diagonal is locked, so now no worries about queen takes g3. So now the long diagonal is locked, so now the queen has to step back. So we have queen to f6, we have rook from a to d1, and now after rook to g7, king to h1. So finally young Krzysztof Duda is getting out of the range, out of the potential range of course on the g file, because the king was a little bit exposed. If something gets cleared on the g file, then the king could be endangered. So we have rook to f8, and this move is not working anymore, because I think here finally young Krzysztof Duda has regrouped. He has now good defensive choices. What he maybe Fabi should have played, if you start attack now g4 is maybe playable. Now after move knight to h4 there is even this line, e takes d4, c takes d4, maybe to catch the d4 pawn, but this was I think a beautiful trap by young Krzysztof Duda. Actually this move bishop to d4 is not working. Look what happens if you're asking yourself the question, why didn't Fabi go for a d4 pawn? Then here after something like, I don't know, h takes g4, h takes g4, rook to d4 is working, a beautiful exchange, sacrifice, queen to d4. But look at this, now you lose the battle around the e6 square. I've said it in the beginning many times, it can become a huge tactical problem. You have to play something like, I don't know, king to h8, but look at this, knight to g4 is going to happen, and now both of these knights with the support of the queen are dancing in front of black's king. So it's I think a tactically lost game here for Fabiano Caruana. So this wasn't played, this was the opportunity after e takes d4, c takes d4. I really was curious what is going to happen if Fabi would have gone for the d4 pawn. But okay, let's go back. After move king to h1, Fabi didn't play the move g4. He played the rook to f8, included now the rook into the game. But now young Krzysztof Duda played d takes e5 immediately after d takes e5. This was again maybe a slightly inaccurate move, because maybe here queen to e7 is slightly better, because okay, you have lost the pawn. Now if black get challenged in this way, still we can take c takes d6, but at least you have some kind of a pawn mobility here. At least you are dominating in the center of the board, still with this beautiful attacking formation. Maybe you can make something out of this. But okay, after d takes e5, here Fabi played d takes e5, and look at this, now this is a double pawn structure. It's a messed up pawn structure here for Fabi. So in the continuation, now h4, and this is the move that I really like the most now in young Krzysztof Duda's game. Now with this move, he's basically defending here in a beautiful way. Nothing can happen, I think, anymore in this position. If you play, of course, g4, then you get knight to g5. The knight gets fixed. The problem is now if you take queen takes f2, again, look, you lose the battle, as we said, around the square e6. So that's the downside about this line that I said in the beginning. When you trade off the light square bishops immediately, even if you play bishop to f2 here, nothing dramatically changes, because rook to f1 is going to happen. Now you're pinned. We can include now the king into the attack, and I think you lose the game simply here against the bishop. So really dirty tactics could have happened in this game. So as I said, after move h4, g4 is not working, so that's why I liked really young Krzysztof Duda move here. He defended now in a beautiful way. So that's why G takes H4, and this was the only way for Fabi to make something out of this position, to open some files. Here in the continuation we have G takes H4, but nothing special. Again here young Krzysztof Duda can compete on the G file and has now a much better position. So especially because of the fact that we can still use this G5 square in order to cement the position and then continue the pressure, you know, against this main structural weakness, against this weakness on E6. So we have here bishop to C5. Fabi is trying to include more pieces into the game. Rook to G1, we have bishop to D6, we have knight to G5, and now after king to H8 we have here now the move queen to E2 by young Krzysztof Duda. He's trying to attack the pawn immediately, but actually what he could have played, and this would be much better, sorry, after move instead of this move queen to E2, he could have gone with this idea. Knight to E6 is perfectly fine. I'm sure that maybe somewhere Duda saw this move, but he maybe didn't want to simplify the game too much, because of course now Fabi has to take rook to G1, maybe rook to E8, and now again knight to G5. But this is enough. I think you can still have this knight to F7 powerful check. You can still include the knight, this other knight, into the game. Still you can play queen to E2, the move that Duda played before, but I really like more this line, knight to E6. Grab your pawn, grab your weakness, and then step back again here to G5. But okay, Duda played queen to E2 instead of knight to E6. His new target was now this weakness on H5, and in some occasions if you lose the H5 you could lose the game immediately, because there are even some checkmate threats that could be possible. But if you take of course also the H5 pawn, then knight to G4 is coming into the game. So this was now Duda's idea to get also this other knight into the game. So we have a rook, queen to G6, a rook to D3, good move, connecting the rooks now on the G file. 8 takes B5, we have rook to G3, queen to E8, the queen gets out of the mess, and now 8 takes B5. And this was again an unnecessary move here by Duda. Again, he could have won the game immediately here with this idea. Knight to E6 is again working, because now the rook is hanging. You have to play first rook takes G3, but now after rook to G3, the problem is now you don't have time to take the pawn on E6, because you get checkmated here with the move queen to H5. So that's why after move rook to G8 would be a must move, but now again we play queen to F3. Now in the continuation you can maybe take, but now first here the check is coming. Now when you move the king, now we can play F takes G3. Look at this powerful knight to F3, knight to G5 is going to happen. So it's a losing position here for Fabiano Caruana. So I'm really a bit sad that Duda missed a couple of times this move knight takes E6, because it would be devastating here for Fabiano if he would have seen this move many times. But here after move 8 takes B5 was played, here we have rook to F6, and now queen to F1, including now the queen here on the G file. So Duda still had some plans. Duda is not losing the game because maybe he didn't saw the best tactical sequence, but now he has to struggle. He has to now find new opportunities in the game. So we have here B6, queen to G2, we have a queen to F8, and now queen to H3, attacking again the weakness on E6. So that's why queen to G8, now rook to G2, we have a knight to B7, and now knight to H7. This was really a brilliant move here by young Krzysztof Duda. Whatever you do, if you take of course with the rook, you lose simply the queen. If you take with the queen, then we take out the rook, and then again it's game over. So nothing dramatically can change. If you take rook takes G3, the problem is now you get knight to F6. It comes of course with a direct threat against the queen, and if you take out now the queen, then we have this one, rook to G8, a beautiful checkmate. So very wild stuff what young Krzysztof Duda prepared here. So after move knight to H7, here Fabi played rook to G6, Duda traded off, rook takes G6, rook takes G6, and now again knight to G5. But now look at this pawn, it's really in a bad situation. Now again queen to F3 could work with this idea. So basically the game turned into a similar position that we have seen before, but still nothing changed here for Fabiano. Still he has so many weaknesses. E5 is weak, E6 is weak, H5 is weak, and this is a much better position for Duda. So we have rook to F6, so we have F4, and this was really a beautiful move. Look what happens if you play here this idea. If you play E takes F4, then you get even E5, and now after bishop to E5 we have here queen to f3. That was the beautiful idea here by young Krzysztof Duda. Notice that still, of course, the queen is also on the g file. Now this is hanging, the knight on b7 is hanging, so really beautiful tactic that young Krzysztof Duda pull off here. So f4, really beautiful move. So we have knight to c5, f takes e5, we have d takes e5, but now knight to f3 is simply winning the game here for Duda, because now look at this, the bishop is hanging, but also the queen is attacked here on the g file. Brilliant tactical shot. So it's basically completely losing game here for Fabiano Caruana. So queen to a8, spicing up at least somehow the game, trying to complicate things, but nothing special here. Duda simply took. We have knight takes e5. If you play here queen to f3, it's nothing special. Queen to g3 is going to happen. There are some checkmate threats. Checks are not possible even if you play maybe one check. Still we have rook to g1, but still you're losing the battle for sure on the g file. So here in the continuation, that's why after move knight takes e5, we have knight takes e4. Here Duda played knight to f3. He has now an extra piece, and this should be enough in order to win the game. So queen to a1, played by Fabi, trying to complicate things by delivering some checks, but nothing special. King to h2. After queen to c1, now the queen is getting again into the game, maybe with some ideas to play queen to f4, but here Duda played a really beautiful calm move. He played simply knight to d3. So after knight to d3, here Fabi simply took the pawn on c3. Here Duda responded with rook to a2, including now the rook into the game. It's of course trying to deliver some annoying checks, so that's why first knight to f2. We have rook takes f2, and after queen takes d3, here queen to g3. Duda connects now the pieces, has now really compact position with all of his pieces. Here Fabiano tries to spice it up by playing queen to d6, queen takes d6, he takes d6. He has now two connected pass pawns, but here Duda plays the correct move, king to g3, includes now the king into the game, and now the idea is clear. We want to play something like knight to d4, trade off the rooks, maybe even knight to g5, and then simplify the game. Then if we grab this pawn, maybe one of the central pawns, it's then again a completely winning game. So we have rook to f5, we have rook to d2, rook takes b5, but finally Duda takes also this very important pawn on d6, king to g7, rook takes e6. We have here this idea, rook to b4. Here Fabiano Caruana is trying to take out this pawn, but now rook to e5. We have king to h6, rook to d5, we have rook to b1, knight to d4, and after rook to g1, king to f4. In this position, Fabiano Caruana resigned, because the problem is now, even if you take here the pawn, we can play something like this. You don't have time to take out the pawn on h4 because you get the fork, so that's why this is not an extra tempo here for Fabi. So now here Duda can of course use the king into the in the attack. He can deliver some checks, he can take out this pawn, he can protect, and afterwards of course with knight to f5, the pawn on h4. But now the knight, when it will be centralized, then nothing can be done about this position anymore. So great game, I think, by Duda. Fabiano lost, I think, now every chance to win this event. This would be a miracle if Fabiano Caruana wins the FIDE Candidates in 2022, because Nepo would have to lose, I think, the next 2 or 3 games in order to allow here Fabiano to catch up with him. The only player that I think has the opportunity maybe to catch up with him is Hikaru Nakamura, because still he has to play at least one game against Nepo, so he can take away some points against him with a direct win. So still it's unclear, but as I said, it's now huge opportunity for Nepo to win the candidates and maybe again to play against the world champion Magnus Carlsen. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. Interesting ideas of the Italian game. Be careful about your e6 pawn. Many tactical ideas can happen in these types of structures. If you want to see other games in the super event, check out my coverage so far with some other great games that we have seen in the super event. Here's the link of our whole playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.